Hello, I'm EJ Anderson Gray, and welcome to Hope Restored, where we share amazing, impactful stories of restoration, where God intervened when man had run out of ideas. You will hear from people who survived and thrived after intense personal experiences, which took their Christian journey to a whole new level. Stories of illness, loss, and adversity that challenged many areas of their lives, including their faith. Experiences they would never have survived without a sense of hope. The Bible encourages us to be prayerful, faithful, and hopeful. So join us to have your hope restored. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Hope Restored. Today's guest is a teacher, preacher, writer, and speaker. A woman who, after 17 years of battling with a physically debilitating illness, went to a prayer conference in her motability scooter and left walking. Annette Ruth Pearson, welcome to the show.
Thank you, EJ. Welcome.
Oh, it's lovely to see you. So, Annette, firstly, tell us about this condition that you have and how it affects you physically.
So in 1996, I was diagnosed with the autoimmune illness lupus. Now, for those of you who haven't heard of lupus, it is a disease that can impact any part of your body. There are two types of it, SLE, which is the systemic version, and the discord one, which tends to impact your skin. Now, to put this in a simple way that people can understand, when you are ill or you have an infection in your body, your white blood cells go and attack the virus or attack the bacteria. When you have lupus, those white blood cells will go and attack healthy cells in your body. So you get the feeling as if you're ill, like with flu or other viral infections, but that's not what's making you ill. It's the actual fact that the white blood cells are attacking your body.
Wow. So the type you have is...
So the type I have is the SLE, so the one that's systemic.
Systemic, all right. And so you were diagnosed in 1996.
Yes. So
Can you remember? Was it 1996?
1996. So at the time, my two sons were very young, under 5 at the age. And I remember at the time I kept going in and out of hospital that particular year. And the doctor that was seeing me, the consultant, decided that he was going to bring me in for a series of investigations. Now, the first I'd heard of lupus was a TV program that was on at that time, and it was called Lady Killers. And it was showing that if you was diagnosed with lupus, your life expectancy was 5 years.
Wow.
So you can imagine with me being told that, you have this condition and media outside are telling you you've got life expectancy of 5 years, and I have 2 young children.
Wow. So what were your thoughts? What thoughts went through your mind?
Lots of emotional, like, who's going to look after my children? Wow. That was my main concern. How is this condition going to impact me? Because I was told it can impact your lungs, it can impact your heart, it can impact your kidneys. That's like the extreme of where it can go to, that it's a debilitating, it impacts your mobility, it makes you feel tired all the time. And I'm thinking, if I'm tired and having to look after 2 young children, how am I going to cope?
Wow, that is a lot. So you're a teacher in secondary education, so a rewarding job, but challenging nonetheless. You're also a mother of 2 sons, also rewarding, can also be challenging. You're an active member of your church. How did you balance all of this?
So at the time, I think when the doctor told me that I had this condition, as you can imagine, it was like, shock. And what was really interesting, it was week of prayer. So like, I remember it was November at the time, that 1996, and it was week of prayer. And I remember, the doctor coming back to me after they'd run all the tests and telling me this is the condition that I have. But the good thing, the positive thing was they said, yes, the media and tells you you've got this 5 years life expectancy. But if you learn to look after yourself and learn the signs and symptoms that you have, because they said everybody is unique. So although you have the general condition lupus, everyone, it impacts their body in a different way. So once you get to learn your signs and symptoms and work with them, then it will increase your quality of life, but it will also increase your life expectancy. So for myself, when I first had it, I ended up with what they call the butterfly rash. So like on your face, it was all red. I ended up with skin, you end up with mouth ulcers, you're very, as I said, for me, it was the tiredness. So at the time I was fortunate because we had an au pair that lived with us. So they would help to manage the workload that I had. So if I had no external help, at the time I was still married as well. So, I had help from the husband. But the key thing was I had the au pair that lived in with us. So, she would do a lot of the external work. So I would go to work, and then when I come home, then I'd have help from her managing with the boys and managing with the housework.
Wow. So that's a lot, a lot going on there. I mean, I've got to ask you, what was the effect on your spiritual life? Did you at any point question God?
Oh,
you've got 5 years possibly to live, maybe more, but you don't even know how much more, according to what the doctors have said. It's like, it could extend your life expectancy if you look after yourself well. Did you ever question God?
Oh, definitely. I mean, you just sit down and you've been in church doing all the things that you're told to do, in terms of building that relationship with God. And now you find yourself at this position where you're not sure what your future holds. And it can be very difficult. And especially when people say, well, you're in church, so your life is going to be fine. And it's not like that. So it's very much, and I think it was like at that time, my relationship with God, now I know where my relationship with God is now. I realized it was there, but it wasn't a intimate relationship. It was more like I knew about God, but didn't know him for myself.
Wow.
So in terms of when you're saying about questioning God, at that time, it wasn't really something that I would do. It's just you accepted this is what was happening. And therefore you just decided, okay, this is what's happening. So I just need to make the most of the situation.
Oh, okay. Wow. And I'm now thinking about, because as we know, an integral part of your story is at this prayer conference. What led up to you deciding to actually go to the prayer conference? What was happening with you at the time when you made the decision to go to this prayer conference? Was it any particular thing? Was it an invitation? What was happening at the time? Tell us about that.
So I'm going to backtrack probably maybe about 9 months before attending the conference. So I was working at the church school, deputy teacher in the church school, and then the church school closed. So when that closed, there was lots of emotions, there was lots of things that were running around in my head at the time. And especially because of all the challenges that were happening in the church outside, and then people's views as to why the school closed. And there was all of this that was taking place. Now, because we were told in July that the school was closing literally in the next few weeks, I wasn't able to secure work for September. So therefore, now I end up going back doing supply work. So I took a break because I was studying at the time. And then I ended up with one job in one school. And it was like lots of challenges there. And then I got an opportunity to go and work down in Deal. So I was basically traveling down to Deal every Sunday.
And Deal is where?
Deal is in Kent. So
And
Deal,
you live,
and I live in East London, so it's a good
so
hour and
East London to Kent.
a
Yeah.
good hour and a half, hour and
Wow.
45 minutes. I was traveling down to Deal every Sunday. Initially, I stayed in a hotel. Then God was fortunate that I moved into a family that was looking for someone to rent. So I was with this family. And while I was at the school, again, there was lots of challenges that were taking place. And you know, when God allows somebody to be there with you. So the lady who was with me, she was a nurse. And she was concerned with my breathing. She said, like, you know what, your breathing doesn't sound right. So you need to go and book an appointment with a GP. So that Friday, I booked an appointment with the GP. And he said to me, your chest seems fine, but because I know you have this medical condition, I'm going to start you on antibiotics. So that was the Friday. And then the Sabbath morning and the Saturday morning, I was staying with some friends. I got up the Saturday morning and was unable to walk. So I'd literally, if you imagine, I'd traveled back from Deal. I'd been in work for the whole week. I traveled back the Friday, and now Saturday morning, I find myself not able to look after myself. Had to ring 111, and they basically said, you're having a lupus flare up, so we need to get you to the hospital.
Wow.
So I ended up going to my local hospital and spent 3 weeks in the hospital with them running tests to try and find out how I could be at work one day, and the next day I'm in hospital in a lot of pain, cannot walk. So then I came out. So that was like my first hospital admission. And now, because I wasn't working, it's not like, you know, so because obviously I'm doing supply, so I'm not in full-time jobs. Now I'm being put on benefits. So there's a lot of emotional things that were running around in my head at the time. And one of the ladies I'd met at this retreat, because she does work with women, had contacted me and says, you know what, God has been in touch and said, now's the time for you to start to write your book. Now, I'm a science and maths teacher, not English is not my forte, but I was writing like devotions on the back of other people's comments. Like, you know, someone would write a devotion and I would write a comment on it. And now God was saying, I want you to write your own devotions. And because this retreat, so we'd had like a day event, and now this was the first women's retreat they were having. And she goes, you know what, whenever you're writing, it's always good to have a fresh audience, get opinions from people who don't know you to give you feedback on your writing. So at that time, I'm sick on my bed. I wrote 3 devotions. So the first one was called Listening to Your Voice. The second one, Be a Good Witness. And the third one, Refreshed and Restored, which was the title of the retreat. And then literally now we're getting up to the retreat was in May, end of May. And now we're getting to the beginning of May now, and I take sick again. So now I'm back in hospital for the second time, having a major lupus flare up.
Just before the
retreat, like
the
2
retreat,
weeks,
right?
2 weeks before the retreat.
Right.
And this time I'm literally like, I'm just sleeping all the time. The medication they put me on, it was to alleviate the pain, but I was just sleeping. And like they sent me to see my consultant, and when they saw my consultant was, they were concerned, and then saying that they're going to have to try and change my medication, because, as I said, the amount of pain that I was in. And like, because like normally when they do physiotherapy in the hospital, they do it to the older patients, but because they needed to get me mobile, they started to give me physiotherapy at work at the hospital as well, to try and get my legs back working. Because when they're in this condition, I find it extremely difficult to walk. So the physiotherapy came, they started the treatment, and then they decided that instead of me staying in the hospital bed, they'd allow me to come home and have the physiotherapy at home. So late on the Thursday evening, the retreat's the Friday, I'm being discharged from the hospital with the view that they'll allow me to go on this retreat, because the doctor said it'd be good for me to just get out of the hospital and get some fresh air, with the view that the physiotherapy will come on the Friday, and then the following week, the physiotherapy will come back. And if they think I need to come back into the hospital, they'd arrange me to go back into the hospital.
So the doctor thinks, okay, you come out, you get your physical therapy at home and go to the retreat. So
Go to the retreat.
Go to the retreat to get out, to be in a different environment. And so you then, how does it, you get to the retreat?
I get to the retreat, and when I get to the retreat, so like literally we arrive at the retreat and we find on my motability scooter decides it's not going to work. So my son,
hold on, we've got a picture of you, I think, in your motability scooter. So what's happening there? Are you being, because somebody's standing with you and I can see you in the scooter.
So this was a time that I went out with one of my friends with a scooter, just to have a breakout. So when we end up, so this was basically now, this particular time. So my son now, when we left that morning, he decided to put the scooter in the car and then escort me into the car. We arrive at the retreat with my friend, put the scooter all together and it won't work. So we have to put it now in manual mode to get me into the hotel. So, I'm sitting
When you
now.
say won't work, what I mean, you're
It
saying it
literally
just,
will not work. Like if those who've seen the motability, you turn a key, and when you
yeah,
turn the key, it
yeah,
will move. The scooter will
right.
move on its own.
So
We
it's
turn
just
the
not,
key,
there's no
it's just no
power,
work,
it's not,
no work, no
right.
power, no
Okay.
nothing.
Okay.
So therefore now we end up having to put it in manual mode and have to push it. So you imagine that my friend is pushing me, we've got the bags, and we go into the hotel in this scooter that's in manual mode and having to move. So that was the Friday night. And then we have a praise and worship session as part of the service. And in
But
that
let me just ask you this. So where's the
okay.
scooter now? The scooter is manually pushed into the
So it's into
hotel.
the hotel room and it's in my room. So it's
Right,
basically we
okay.
park it up in my room, we put it back to charge because we're just thinking, well, has the battery reduced down in that short time? We put it to charge, and my friend escorts me with my stick to the retreat, to the room where we're having the meeting. So I literally have to use the wall, the stick, and the person. So, so it's like having to be escorted to go where I'm going now. So instead of being able to drive with the scooter, which is the plan, now I'm having to be escorted by another member
So
of the
people to
team who is
actually
there.
help you
Correct.
to transport you into the
Correct.
into the session. So tell me what
Yeah.
happens in the session, in the prayer meeting where this all takes place.
Okay.
What happened in that meeting?
So the Friday night we're there, and we have a time of prayer, praise, and we just felt the presence of God. It was really unusual because I've never felt that before. And then I shared the first devotional, listening for God's voice. And now the Saturday evening, now we're having a similar prayer session, and I've got my feet up on the chair, and the women are standing around and they're singing "There's No One Like Jesus." And I was just enjoying myself because at least I'm there with them. And then one of the ladies who was there, who was one of the presenters, came over to me to take my hand, to take me in the middle of the room. And now I'm reluctant to go because, scooter's not working, just got out of hospital. Doctor says I need to look after myself. But my friend who's sitting next to me says to go. And she held my hand and she took me into the middle of the room. And as she told me and tucked me in the middle of the room, then she touched my head and she touched my hips. And I just started to cry. I became overwhelmed with all these emotions. And I found myself kneeling down on the floor. Now, as I knelt down, I was still crying. And then those around said that I just went like held up in a fetal position, and I was just crying and crying and crying. And all of a sudden I stopped crying. And when I stopped crying, it was just silence for a while. And then one of the presenters who was there, God says to her to bend down and touch me and tell me to rise up and walk. Now she's thinking, everybody can see Ruth isn't walking, but you're telling me to rise up and walk. So she came, she touched me on the shoulder and told me to rise up. And then two of the women who were there, including the one who told me to rise up, they took my hand. And I remember just standing up. It was just a weird feeling, standing up, and I'm thinking my back is straight. And
Just
then they took
immediately, you
me
just stood up?
immediately. I just
Immediate.
they held my hand and literally stood up. Like, like you stood up. And then after they stood up, they then allowed me, which was like, when I'm looking back and thinking that, and I walked around the room where the women were there. And as we walked around the room when the women were there, then the next thing is they took me into the middle of the room. So it was myself and this lady side by side. And as we were side by side, then I ended up, she says to me to walk. So she was walking at the side with me. And then I came back, and then she told me I needed to run. And there I was running back and forward in this room unaided.
Wow.
And then when we
So
finished,
how are other people? This is what I'm
you could
thinking.
imagine, there was lots
You
of
must have
crying,
been
there was lots of
overwhelmed.
tears, there was lots of emotions. I went back to my friend who just told me a few minutes to go, and there we were grabbing each other, we were crying, and we were just thinking, God is real. That God is real, that the God that we read about in the Bible is real. And, that was the beginning of my journey with God changing, because it's like I realized he came to see me in that hotel room. He came to visit all of us in that hotel room to let us know that he is real.
Wow, 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 wow. So people, I guess when you got to the hotel, people saw you, like the reception staff and concierge, whoever would have seen you come in, being helped, well, being pushed in the motability scooter. You go to this prayer meeting. People are amazed. There's tears. I guess there's joy and shouting and jubilation and praise. And then you end up, you can walk back to your room. You can walk back to your room. So were there staff that saw you come in the scooter and then saw you walking?
Yes. So the Sunday morning, now the day after, you know, when God sometimes gives you a message. So the day after, God was saying to me, I need to go and tell the hotel staff what had happened. So I came out my room with my friend and we were walking down the middle of the corridor with our hands in the air and singing praises to God. And I walked down to the, you know, the connoisseur at the beginning. And I said to her, is the manager there? And she said, yes. And she goes, everything fine? And I said to her, yes. And I remember, like, she called the manager and then I told her what had happened. Like, you know, that we've been in this prayer meeting and now, as you can see, I can walk. Now, what I didn't realize at the time is the lady turned around and said to the manager, I saw her the day before. I was on duty when she was walking down holding the wall. And now I'm looking and I'm thinking, that's the same woman, but how could she be walking? So even the hotel staff there was able to witness what had taken place.
Amen.
And then, no. And
Amen.
I can imagine. And what was even nicer is some of the women, you imagine I go to bed, they see that the night before, but you know, on TV, you see some of these miracles and you wonder, is it going to last? So in the morning now I come down and the other people who were there at the retreat, they came down. There we were in the hotel lobby. We were jumping for joy. We were singing praises. Because obviously we realize now that this is like, you know, this is what's going to happen. And I remember ringing family and friends. And when I came back home, you've got to remember my neighbors as well have seen me sick all this time.
Yes.
And when I came back home now, they're there. And some of them come out. And I remember one was pinching me and saying, well, it looks like you. It looks like you. But you know what? We can see how you are. So, yes, so it was a full transformation. And I think for me, it wasn't just the physical. God changed my diet. So I tell people I'm vegan by design, not by choice, because literally then my body changed. My sense of smell became very acute. My sense of taste changed. Like I can't put anything in my body that's not natural. Even like washing up the dishes initially, I had to wear gloves because like my family they don't have a vegan diet. So if I was washing up the dishes, my skin would be itching. So yeah, it was a complete transformation.
Transformation, restoration, miracle.
Yes.
Absolute miracle.
It was a miracle.
Was 2014. So we're in now 2022.
Yes.
You're enjoying physical freedom. And so the difference must be just like day and night for you.
It is. It is. I mean, for me, the biggest, I suppose, testimony for God is that, you know, like everybody else during COVID, I've had my share of challenging times, you know, lost loved ones, etc. And when I lost a really good friend and I didn't end up in hospital, because that was everybody thought like, you know what, the old Ruth, this is where I would end up. And I didn't. That's when people realized the extent of my healing, because it was not just like, you know, because it was the whole emotional, it was, the, you know, it was the whole total package that God had done.
And you've gone on to, I mean, I said you're a speaker, a writer, a teacher, but you have been writing. You've written some, you know, not just couple of devotions. You've written some books. How many books have you written?
I've lost count. So
I have at least 6.
Yes, I have
that I know about.
Some books myself. So I've got like a self-help coaching book, Say Yes to New Opportunities. I wrote a book during COVID about overcoming challenges in difficult times. I've co-authored books with other females. And I've got a range of journals as well for you to sit down and write about, you know, like journals, like gratitude journals, because that's one of the things I realize has helped is being grateful for God and remembering at the end of the day that the journey that he's taken us through.
So where can people connect with you in terms of your books, your literature? Where can they get hold of? Yeah, your stuff.
The best place is on Amazon. So on Amazon are all my books. So if you type in Annette Ruth Pearson or Ruth Pearson or LTYV, which is listening to your voice, because in the midst of all this as well, God's allowed me to set up my own publishing company now.
Amen.
So that I'm able to help other people to share God's words. So yeah, so my books are on Amazon. Website's down at the moment because I'm updating the website, or you can connect me with me on LinkedIn. That's probably the best place. So on LinkedIn, under Annette Ruth Pearson, or on Amazon, that's where my books are.
Amazing, amazing. So, wow, people, connect, go and read these books. I mean, some amazing, not just the experiences, but the journey and sharing about self-help and how you can take yourself from one place and take the challenges and you know, build bridges and walk over them into new experiences. Absolutely amazing. So
I'm going to share one other thing before we
yeah,
finish up as well.
yes,
You talked about me preaching. So during
yes,
lockdown, I started to preach. So if you want to hear some of my sermons, if you connect on Annette Ruth Pearson on YouTube, you'll also hear my sermons that I recorded during lockdown. So they're on there as well if you want to hear some of the messages I was sharing during lockdown.
Amen. That's wonderful. Thank you for that. And what would you say to anyone, you know, before we go, just any encouragement, anything that you'd say to anyone struggling with an autoimmune condition such as lupus?
Go get help. You know, go get the help that you need and have a good support network around you. You know, I was able to cope and still able to cope around because I've got a good support network. And in terms of your faith journey, go attend a church where you can be real and open about your feelings and emotions. And as you're able to do that, then it will help you when you're going through these challenging times.
Amen. Well, Ruth, thank you so much for being here. It's been wonderful speaking to you, and thank you so much for sharing your journey. You know, and I'm praying that others will hear your journey, your experience, and really connect with what God is able to do for His children. All right. So bye for now. See you soon. Take care. God bless.
God bless.
If you were encouraged and you want to see more inspiring interviews like this, share with other people. Be blessed. Stay hopeful.